The autumn rain had finally stopped, leaving the cobblestones of Ashford Avenue glistening like scattered diamonds under the streetlights. Marcus wiped his worn sneakers on a patch of dry pavement, took a deep breath that misted in the cold evening air, and pressed play on his grandfather's old portable speaker. The device was held together with electrical tape and hope, but it still worked, and that was all that mattered. As the music began, a gentle piano melody that swelled into something grander, Marcus started to move. He danced not on a stage, not in a studio with mirrors and ballet bars, but on the sidewalk outside the towering iron gates of the Ashford estate. The mansion beyond those gates rose like a castle from a storybook, all white columns and glowing windows that seemed to hold a world Marcus had only ever imagined. But he wasn't dancing for the mansion or its wealth. He was dancing for her. 17-year-old Marcus Chen had discovered his love for dance in the most unlikely place, the cramped living room of his grandmother's apartment in the Riverside district, where 3 generations shared 4 rooms and dreams were expensive luxuries. His grandmother had been a dancer once, in another country, in another lifetime. She'd shown him the basics when he was 7, her weathered hands guiding his small ones through positions that had names in French, a language that sounded like music itself. Dance is freedom, she'd told him in her accented English. When you dance, Marcus, you are rich. You are powerful. You are exactly who you were meant to be. Now, at 17, Marcus understood what she meant. When he danced, he wasn't the scholarship kid at Westfield High who wore the same 3 shirts in rotation. He wasn't the boy who worked weekends at the corner grocery store to help pay bills. He wasn't the teenager who'd watched his mother work double shifts at the hospital until exhaustion became her constant companion. When he danced, he was simply Marcus, and that was enough. His movements now were fluid despite the cold that stiffened his muscles. A pirouette, slightly wobbly but filled with conviction. An arabesque that stretched toward the dimming sky. His style was unconventional, a blend of the classical techniques his grandmother had taught him and the street dance he'd learned from YouTube videos watched on a cracked phone screen. It shouldn't have worked, this combination of ballet and hip-hop, of structure and improvisation, but somehow, it did. Marcus didn't notice the black sedan that slowed as it passed. He didn't see the driver's curious glance or the way the car pulled over 3 houses down. He was lost in the music, in the story his body was telling, a story of hope and determination, of dreams that refused to die despite every practical reason they should. What he did notice, as he completed a series of quick footwork that would have made his grandmother smile, was the curtain moving in the 3rd-floor window of the mansion. Just a flutter of fabric, barely visible in the golden light spilling from inside. But it was enough. She was watching. This was why Marcus came here 3 times a week, rain or shine, cold or colder. For the girl in the window who never came outside. He'd first seen her 6 months ago, a pale face pressed against glass, watching the world beyond her reach. Marcus had been walking home from his shift at Mr. Patterson's grocery store, taking the long route because it was safer after dark and because the Ashford estate was beautiful to look at, a reminder that beauty existed even in a world that often felt harsh and unforgiving. The girl had been there in the window, and even from the street, Marcus could see the longing in her expression. It was a look he recognized, the same one he saw in his own mirror when he thought about dance programs he couldn't afford in futures that seemed impossibly distant. The next week, on impulse, Marcus had brought his speaker. He'd danced, and she'd watched. It became a ritual, unspoken but understood. He never saw her smile, the distance was too great, but he imagined that maybe, for those 15 or 20 minutes when he danced, she felt a little less alone. Tonight, emboldened by the way the curtain had moved, Marcus added something new to his routine. He'd been practicing for weeks, a sequence that told a complete story. It began with constrained, tight, controlled movements that suggested limitation, a body bound by invisible chains. Then, gradually, the movements opened up, expanded, until he was leaping and spinning with abandon, his arms spread wide as if he could embrace the entire sky. It was a dance about breaking free, about transcending circumstances. It was a dance for her. As the music built to its crescendo, Marcus executed his best grand jeté, a split leap that sent him soaring through the air for one perfect moment. He landed with surprising grace for someone who'd learned the move from a scratchy video, his chest heaving with exertion, his breath coming in visible puffs. The song ended. Marcus bowed deeply, formally, toward the 3rd-floor window. When he straightened, the curtain was still now, but he hoped that she'd seen every moment. Quite a performance. Marcus spun around, his heart leaping into his throat. A man stood beside the black sedan, the same car Marcus hadn't noticed earlier. He was tall, perhaps in his early 50s, with silver threading through dark hair and the kind of perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than Marcus's grandmother paid in rent for 6 months. But it was his eyes that caught Marcus's attention, sharp and assessing, but not unkind. I'm sorry, Marcus stammered, suddenly aware of how he must look, a skinny teenager in worn clothes, trespassing, sort of, and disturbing the peace of this quiet, wealthy street. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I'm on the public sidewalk. I checked. It's legal to. The man held up a hand, and Marcus fell silent. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm simply curious. You come here often? It wasn't really a question. Marcus swallowed hard. 3 times a week. For about 6 months. Always at 7 in the evening. Always for approximately 20 minutes. Always outside this particular property. The man's expression was unreadable. I'm James Ashford. I own that mansion you've been performing for. The blood drained from Marcus's face. Of all the people to catch him, it had to be the billionaire himself. James Ashford was a legend in the city, the man who'd built a tech empire from nothing, whose company employed thousands, whose philanthropy was as famous as his business acumen. And Marcus had been essentially loitering outside his home for half a year. Mr. Ashford, I can explain. Can you? James Ashford took a step closer, and Marcus resisted the urge to back away. Because I've been trying to understand it myself. My head of security alerted me months ago about a teenager who appears outside my gates 3 times a week to dance. I had him investigated, of course. Marcus's stomach dropped. Investigated. Of course someone like Ashford would have him investigated. Marcus Chen, James continued, his tone matter of fact. 17 years old. Junior at Westfield High on academic scholarship. Lives with your mother and grandmother in Riverside. Works part-time at Patterson's Grocery. No criminal record, excellent grades, and according to your teachers, a young man of exceptional character and determination. So I'll ask again, why are you here? The question hung in the cold air between them. Marcus could have lied. Could have said he just liked the neighborhood, liked the architecture, liked having space to practice. But something in James Ashford's direct gaze demanded honesty. Your daughter, Marcus said quietly. I dance for your daughter. James Ashford's expression shifted, just slightly, but enough for Marcus to see the flash of pain before it was locked away behind the mask of control. You know about Lily. It wasn't a question, but Marcus nodded anyway. I saw her in the window about 6 months ago. She looked. He struggled for the right words. She looked like someone who needed to see something beautiful. Something free. He gestured helplessly at himself. I know I'm not exactly a professional dancer or anything, but I thought maybe. You thought you could give her a gift, James finished. His voice had softened, and when he looked at Marcus now, there was something like wonder in his eyes. You don't know her. You've never spoken to her. You have no reason to spend your time, 3 nights a week, dancing on a cold sidewalk for a girl you've never met. Yet you do it anyway. Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable with the intensity of James's scrutiny. Everyone deserves to see something good. To feel less alone. For a long moment, James Ashford said nothing. He simply looked at Marcus with an expression that was impossible to read. Then, he pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. How old did you say you were? 17? Yes, sir. And your birthday? Marcus blinked at the unexpected question. May 15th. Why? James didn't answer directly. Instead, he pocketed his phone and fixed Marcus with that assessing gaze again. My daughter, Lily, is 15 years old. 2 years ago, she was in a car accident. The other driver ran a red light while texting. Lily survived, but she suffered a spinal cord injury. She's paralyzed from the waist down. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He'd suspected something like this. Of course, it was why she never came outside, why she was always in that window, but hearing it confirmed made it real in a way that hurt. Since the accident, James continued, his voice carefully controlled, Lily has become withdrawn. She was once vibrant, full of life. She loved ballet, was training to audition for the Metropolitan Youth Company. After the accident, she refused physical therapy. Refused counseling. She barely speaks, barely eats. She sits in that window and watches a world she believes she can never be part of again. James's jaw tightened, and for a moment, the billionaire facade cracked, revealing a father's anguish. I've hired the best doctors, the best therapists. I've offered her everything money can buy. Nothing has worked. She's given up, Marcus. My daughter has given up on life, and his voice broke, just slightly. I don't know how to reach her anymore. Marcus's throat felt tight. I'm sorry, he said, inadequate words for an impossible situation. Don't be sorry, James said, regaining his composure. Be useful. He pulled out a business card and handed it to Marcus. My head of security, Robert Chen, any relation? My uncle, Marcus said, stunned as he looked at the card. His uncle Robert, who he saw maybe twice a year at family gatherings, worked for James Ashford? Small world, James mused. Robert mentioned he had a nephew with dreams of being a dancer. I didn't make the connection until tonight. He gestured to the card. That has my private number on it. I want you to meet Lily. Marcus stared at him. What? You've been dancing for her for 6 months. She watches you, Robert confirmed it. Every time you're here, she's in that window. It's the only time she shows interest in anything. James's expression was intense now, urgent. I don't know what you're doing, Marcus, or why it matters to her. But you've reached her in a way no one else has. So I'm asking you, will you meet her? Talk to her? Maybe show her that life can still be worth living? It was too much. This conversation, this request, the weight of this billionaire's desperate hope now resting on Marcus's shoulders. Mr. Ashford, I'm just a kid who dances on sidewalks. I'm not a therapist or. I have therapists. I have a team of medical professionals. What I don't have is someone who makes my daughter want to look out the window. James's voice was raw now, stripped of pretense. Please, Marcus. I'm not asking as James Ashford, the CEO. I'm asking as a father who's watching his daughter fade away and doesn't know how to save her. Marcus looked up at the mansion, at that third-floor window that had become so familiar. He thought about the girl behind the glass, the one who'd lost her dreams in a moment of someone else's carelessness. He thought about his grandmother's words, when you dance, you are exactly who you were meant to be. Maybe Lily needed to remember who she was meant to be too. Okay, Marcus heard himself say. I'll meet her. The relief on James Ashford's face was almost painful to witness. Thank you, he said, and Marcus could hear that he meant it from the depths of his soul. Come tomorrow. 7 o'clock. Robert will meet you at the gate. Tomorrow, Marcus repeated, his mind reeling. James turned to go, then paused. Marcus? She's been through something terrible. She's angry and hurt and scared. This won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is, Marcus said, echoing something his grandmother always told him. James Ashford smiled a real smile, small but genuine. No, he agreed. It isn't. He got into his sedan and drove through the gates that swung open automatically. Marcus watched until the car disappeared up the long driveway, then looked down at the business card in his hand. The expensive cardstock felt heavy, weighted with responsibility. Marcus picked up his speaker, wrapping the cord carefully around it as he always did. As he turned to head home, he glanced once more at that third-floor window. The curtain was pulled back now, and though the distance was too great to see clearly, he could make out a figure silhouetted against the light. He raised his hand in a small wave. After a heartbeat, the figure moved.
It might have been a wave back. It might have been nothing. But it might have been the beginning of something.
Marcus walked home through streets that were familiar but felt somehow different tonight. The city was the same cracked sidewalks, the same flickering streetlights, the same sound of traffic in the distance. But Marcus felt changed, as if he'd crossed an invisible threshold into a new chapter of his life. The riverside apartment was warm when he let himself in, filled with the smell of his grandmother's cooking and the sound of a television playing the evening news. His mother was still at work. The night shift at Mercy General didn't end until 11, but his grandmother was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup that would be stretched to feed them all for the next 2 days. "You're late," she said in Mandarin, not looking up from her stirring.
The dancing went long?
Marcus set his speaker on the counter and kissed her weathered cheek.
Something happened, Nai.
Something in his tone made her look up sharply, her dark eyes studying his face.
What kind of something? So Marcus told her.
He told her about James Ashford, about the investigation, about Lily and the car accident and the impossible request that he somehow help a broken girl find her way back to living. His grandmother listened without interrupting, continuing to stir her soup with slow, methodical movements. When Marcus finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "This is a heavy burden for one so young," she finally said.
"I know. Maybe I shouldn't have said yes. Maybe I should call Anne."
"I did not say you should not do it," she interrupted gently.
"I said it was heavy."
"Heavy things make us stronger, Marcus, if we do not let them crush us." She set down her spoon and took both his hands in hers, her grip surprisingly strong.
"You have a gift. Not just the dancing, though that is beautiful. You have the gift of seeing people. Of understanding their pain. Of wanting to help even when it costs you something. What if I can't help her?"
Marcus whispered the fear that had been growing in his chest since he'd walked away from James Ashford.
"What if I make things worse?"
His grandmother smiled, the kind of smile that held wisdom earned through years of hardship and survival.
"Then you will have tried."
"And sometimes, Marcus, trying is the only miracle we can offer." She squeezed his hands. "You dance for her because it makes her look out the window.
That is already a miracle. Whatever happens next, you remember that."
That night, Marcus lay in bed in the room he shared with his mother. His grandmother took the smaller bedroom, insisting age required less space, staring at the water-stained ceiling and thinking about tomorrow. About Lily Ashford, who had everything except the one thing that mattered, the ability to walk through the world on her own 2 legs. He thought about his grandmother's words.
About miracles in trying.
About the weight of other people's hopes. And he thought about dance, how it had saved him in ways he couldn't fully articulate. How it had given him purpose and joy and a sense of self when the world seemed determined to make him feel small and insignificant.
Could dance save Lily too? Could anything? Marcus didn't have answers.
All he had was the promise he'd made to a desperate father and the hope that somehow, he could keep it. Tomorrow, he would find out. Marcus stood outside the gates of the Ashford estate at exactly 7 o'clock the next evening, his heart hammering against his ribs. He'd changed clothes 3 times before settling on his least-worn jeans and a button-up shirt his mother had bought him for school presentations. He'd even attempted to do something with his hair, though it stubbornly refused to cooperate. Now, looking up at the mansion through the ornate iron bars, he felt ridiculous. What was he doing here? What could he possibly say to a girl who lived in a different universe than his own? Before his nerves could win and send him running back to Riverside, the gates began to swing open. A man stepped through, middle-aged, solidly built, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled.
Marcus recognized him immediately from family gatherings. "Uncle Robert?" "Marcus."
Robert Chen pulled him into a brief hug, then held him at arm's length, studying him with an expression that was equal parts familial warmth and professional assessment. "I have to say, I didn't expect my nephew to be the mysterious sidewalk dancer who had Mr. Ashford's security team scratching their heads for months."
"You knew it was me?" "Not until yesterday when Mr. Ashford showed me the background check and I saw the name."
Robert shook his head with a rueful smile. "Your grandmother is going to have stories to tell at the next family dinner.
Come on, let's get you inside before you freeze out here." Marcus followed his uncle up the long driveway, his sneakers crunching on perfect gravel. Up close, the mansion was even more impressive, a three-story masterpiece of classical architecture with modern touches that somehow worked together seamlessly. Lights glowed warmly from dozens of windows, and Marcus could see the silhouettes of expensive furniture through sheer curtains. "Listen," Robert said as they climbed the front steps, his tone shifting to something more serious. "I need you to understand what you're walking into. Miss Lily, she's not the girl she was before the accident. She can be difficult. Angry. She's pushed away every therapist, every aide, everyone who's tried to help her." "Mr. Ashford told me," Marcus said quietly. "Did he tell you that she hasn't left her room in 3 months? That she barely speaks, even to him?" Robert's expression was pained. "This family is hurting, Marcus. Mr. Ashford is one of the strongest men I know, but watching his daughter give up on life is breaking him. And Mrs. Ashford." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Just be prepared. And be patient." The front door opened before they reached it, revealing James Ashford himself. He'd traded yesterday's suit for expensive but casual clothes, designer jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than Marcus's entire wardrobe. But his eyes held the same desperate hope from the night before. "Marcus. Thank you for coming." James stepped aside to let them in. "Please." Marcus stepped into the foyer and tried not to gape. The entryway alone was larger than his grandmother's entire apartment, with marble floors, a chandelier that sparkled like captured stars, and a grand staircase that curved up to the second floor. Everything spoke of wealth, but it was understated wealth, elegant rather than ostentatious. "Impressive, isn't it?" A woman's voice came from the doorway to the left. Marcus turned to see an elegant blonde woman in her early 40s, perfectly put together in the way that suggested both natural beauty and the resources to maintain it. But like James, her eyes told a different story. They held a weariness that no amount of expensive skincare could hide. "Marcus, this is my wife, Catherine," James said. Catherine Ashford approached and extended her hand. Marcus shook it, noting her firm grip and the way she studied him with the same intensity as her husband. "The dancing boy," she said, and there was no mockery in her tone, only curiosity, and something that might have been gratitude. "James told me about you. About what you've been doing." "I hope it's okay," Marcus said, suddenly worried that maybe Mrs. Ashford didn't approve. "I never meant to intrude or—" "You've been giving my daughter something to look forward to," Catherine interrupted, her voice catching slightly. "That's not an intrusion. That's a gift." She glanced at her husband, and some wordless communication passed between them. "But I need you to understand something before you go up there. Lily is fragile. Not physically, the doctors say she's healing well from her injuries. But emotionally, psychologically, she's barely holding on. We've tried everything," James added, moving to stand beside his wife. Marcus noticed how they leaned into each other, a united front against the tragedy that had struck their family. Therapy, medication, support groups for young people with spinal cord injuries. She refuses it all. She won't engage. The only time she shows any spark of her old self is when she's angry, and most of that anger is directed at us. "She blames us for the accident," Catherine said, her voice steady but her eyes glistening. "She was coming home from ballet practice. We'd promised to pick her up, but we both got caught up in work. She called an Uber instead. The driver who hit them was a college student, texting his girlfriend. Her hands clenched into fists. 3 seconds of distraction destroyed my daughter's life, and she thinks it's our fault for not being there." Marcus felt the weight of their pain pressing down on him. "Maybe she just needs someone to be angry at," he said quietly. "Sometimes blame is easier than accepting that bad things just happen." James and Catherine exchanged another look, this one surprised. "Wise words for someone so young," James observed. Marcus shrugged. "My grandmother says pain has to go somewhere. If we don't let it out, it poisons us from the inside." "Your grandmother sounds like a smart woman," Catherine said. She took a deep breath, visibly steeling herself. "Lily agreed to see you.
I don't know if James told you, but that in itself is remarkable. She hasn't agreed to see anyone new in months.
But Marcus, I need you to promise me something. Anything.